The letter isn't cruel. That's the part nobody expects. It doesn't accuse you of anything. It doesn't raise its voice. It's polite, actually. Clean paper. A reference number in the corner. A phone line at the bottom that leaves you on hold for 40 minutes and then goes dead. It just says your payment is being reduced, or held, or reviewed. And in a small apartment somewhere, a woman in her 40s reads it 3 times, looking for the part that tells her why. There isn't one. She works, that's worth saying, because people assume otherwise. Shifts at a place that doesn't give her enough hours to live on, and won't give her fewer either. The payment is the difference between those hours and the rent. It's not a lifestyle, it's arithmetic. So she calls the number, she waits. She calls again the next morning, because mornings are supposed to be better. And when someone finally picks up, the voice on the other end is kind and tired, and says the only thing that's actually true. It wasn't a decision. It was a system. Not a person, a framework, points and thresholds and deadlines. A set of rules running quietly on a server somewhere, doing exactly what it was built to do. There's nobody to be angry at. That's the strange part. You can't argue with the rule. So she folds the letter in half and puts it under the magnet on the fridge, next to a school photo and a takeout menu. And she does what people do. She figures it out, moves things around, waits. And here's what she doesn't know. Somewhere on the other side of that same system, someone was being paid to check it, to look at the whole machine, the rules, the penalties, the thresholds, and answer one question. Is this fair? Is this working? Should people be treated this way? An independent review, the kind of thing a government orders when the stakes are high enough that it wants someone from the outside to sign off. 237 pages, nearly $500,000 of public money. And parts of it, I want to be careful here, because I want you to hear this exactly. Parts of it were not mistaken. They were invented. Research papers that don't exist. Academics quoted saying things they never said. A book cited as evidence that had never been written by the woman whose name was on it. Now, you'd think that would be the end of it. You'd think a review built partly on things that aren't real would be thrown out, and the whole thing started over. It wasn't. The report was quietly corrected. Part of the money was handed back, and the recommendations, the conclusions about how that system should treat people like her, stayed exactly where they were. Read that again, slowly. The sources were fiction, and it didn't matter. I've spent a long time around numbers, and around the people whose job is to check them. That's the part I can't get past. Not the fake citations. Those are almost boring by now. It's the second half. It's the part where everyone found out and nothing moved. Because if a report can be built on things that don't exist and still stand, then whatever that report was really selling, it was never the truth. So what was it? That's the question this whole thing turns on. And the answer runs deeper than one bad document and one embarrassed firm. It runs through your bank, your retirement, the company you work for, almost every number you've ever been asked to trust. But before any of that makes sense, You need to see the report itself. What was actually inside it, and how one man, reading it on an ordinary afternoon, stopped at a single sentence that didn't smell right. His name is Chris Rudge. He's a researcher in Sydney, health and welfare law, which means he spends his working life reading documents most people would rather chew glass than open. That afternoon, he was reading this one, the independent review, all 237 pages of it. And somewhere in the middle, he hit a sentence and stopped. It cited a book, a serious academic book offered as evidence, with an author's name attached, a professor at his own university, someone he knew of, someone whose field was constitutional law. Except the book wasn't about constitutional law. It was about something else entirely. Something she'd have no particular reason to write about, and no record of ever having written. He said afterward that he knew immediately. It was either hallucinated by AI or the world's best kept secret, because he'd never heard of it, and it sounded preposterous on its face. CFO dive. So he pulled the thread. Papers cited from his own university that nobody there had written. Work credited to academics at a Swedish university who didn't exist. And then the one you can't laugh at. A passage from a federal court judgment, set inside quotation marks, attributed to a judge. The judge never said it. By the time people finished counting, there were more than 20 places in a government document where something had simply been made up. Now step back and look at what this document was. A government department had commissioned it. The department that runs a welfare compliance system. The machinery that decides who gets paid, who gets penalized, who gets held, who gets cut off. They wanted an outside opinion on whether that machinery was working properly, whether it was fair to the people caught inside it. That's what nearly $500,000 of public money bought. And part of what came back was fiction. A newspaper reported it. The firm went and looked, and then, quietly, on a Friday, a new version of the report appeared online, corrected. The corrections were described in the softest language available. Some footnotes and references have been incorrect. Buried in the new version was one more line, a disclosure. In preparing the report, they had used a generative AI model. The firm agreed to hand back the final installment of its fee. And the name on the cover of that report was Deloitte. If that name means anything to you at all, it probably means big accounting company. Something in the background of the business world. Something you have never spent 4 consecutive seconds thinking about. Hold on to that. We're coming back to it. And it's going to look very different. Because here's the part I can't walk past. After all of it, the invented books, the quote the judge never said, the refund, the correction, the department stated that the report's core findings and recommendations were unchanged, still valid, still standing. The conclusions about how that system should treat the woman with the letter under the magnet on her fridge, unchanged. Sit with the logic of that for a second. You take a document, you remove some of the evidence it was built on, because that evidence was never real, and the conclusions don't move. then the evidence was never holding the conclusions up. Something else was. So what does a government spend $500,000 on when it isn't buying the facts? Before I can answer that, you need to know who you're dealing with. Somewhere right now, in a conference room borrowed from a company that would rather they weren't there, 4 or 5 people in their 20s are sitting around a table stacked with documents. They've been there for weeks. They'll be there for weeks more. They are checking whether the numbers this company told the world are the numbers the company actually has. Invoice by invoice, contract by contract, line by line. They're not detectives. Nobody's shouting. It's the least dramatic work you can imagine. And when they're finished, a man they've barely met will read their summary and put his name on it. That signature is one of the most powerful objects in the modern world. There are 4 organizations that produce it at scale: Deloitte, PwC, EY, KPMG. In the trade, people just call them the Big 4. The way you talk about weather, a fact of the landscape, not a thing anyone chose. Between them, around 1.5 million employees, operations in nearly every country on the map. And you have never bought anything from any of them. There's no product, no store, no app, nothing you could hold. They're not even public companies. You can't buy a share. They're private partnerships, owned by their own senior people, answering to no shareholders, no founder's face, no billionaire on a magazine cover. Just a name on a letterhead and a lot of glass. So what are they for? Think about how the economy actually works. A company announces it made $3 billion last year. That's a claim, words on a page. Anyone can say it. Why does the world believe it? Because somebody from outside went in, opened the books, and put their name to it. And the moment that name is attached, the claim stops being a claim. It becomes a fact. Your pension fund invests on that fact. Your bank lends on it. Regulators, journalists, the guy buying shares on his phone at a bus stop. Everything downstream of one signature. Money isn't what holds this up. Verified numbers are. And 4 names do most of the verifying. Now here's the part almost nobody knows. It didn't stay in the private world. Somewhere along the line, government started hiring them too. Not to audit, but to think. To review programs, design systems, advise ministries on how public money should move and who should receive it. Which means when a country wants to know whether its own welfare machinery is fair, it doesn't ask a court. It doesn't ask Parliament. It writes a check to one of 4 private partnerships. Nobody voted for that. There was no announcement. It happened the way most important things happen. Slowly, quietly. In procurement documents nobody reads. And that's the moment this stops being an industry story and becomes yours. The bank holding your money is audited by one of these 4. Probably the fund that pays your retirement. Probably the company that signs your paycheck. The number on your statement is only a number because somebody outside checked it. And there are 4 somebodies on earth big enough to do the checking. You never met them. You never picked them. You've likely never said their names out loud. And every year of your life, you've trusted them anyway. So go back to that report now. 237 pages. $500,000. A court quote nobody ever said. Because this is where I lose the thread. These are not people who cut corners on evidence. Evidence is the entire business. Checking is the product. It's the only thing they've ever sold to anyone for 180 years. And a document came out of that world, built partly on things that don't exist. The world found out, and it barely blinked. That's not a firm failing at its job. That's a firm failing at its job, and everyone agreeing it didn't matter. Which can only mean one thing. Whatever the job actually is, it isn't what all of us have been assuming.
There's an old line in the corporate world. You've probably heard some version of it. Nobody ever got fired for hiring the big firm. People say it as a joke. It isn't one. It's the most honest sentence ever spoken about that entire industry. And once you hear it properly, everything you've just heard rearranges itself. Picture an executive with a hard decision. Close the plant or keep it. Restructure or hold. Cut 2,000 jobs or find another way. He isn't sure. Nobody is. The information is incomplete. The stakes are enormous. And whatever he chooses, half the room will say he was wrong. He has two options. He can decide himself on his own judgment with his own name on it. If it works, he's brilliant. If it fails, he's finished. Or he can hire one of the four. Watch what changes. The analysis might be identical. The conclusion might be exactly what he already believed. But the decision now arrives wrapped in something he didn't have before. A logo, an outside opinion, a document saying a serious and globally respected institution looked at this and agrees. If it works, he's still brilliant. If it fails, he followed the best professional advice available. He did what any reasonable person would have done. That's the product, not the analysis, not the facts, not the truth. What is being purchased at enormous cost is defensibility. Cover. Someone standing beside you when it goes wrong, so it isn't only your name on the wreckage. And now the report makes sense. A department reviewing its own welfare machinery. The machinery that decides who gets paid and who gets penalized. Politically radioactive. If you examine yourself and clear yourself, nobody believes you. You need somebody from the outside. So you buy a signature. And when the evidence inside turned out to be partly invented, and the department said the findings still stood, that wasn't a cover-up. That was the arrangement, telling you exactly what had been bought. Nobody bought the citations. They bought the name on the cover. The name was still there. Nothing essential had been damaged. I need to be fair here, because this could curdle into something cheap very fast. These firms are not con artists. They employ some of the most capable people alive. They do real work, genuine expertise, real methodology, standards that most companies and most governments simply do not have in-house. When a small country needs to rebuild its tax system, there aren't many numbers to call. That value is real, and pretending otherwise would be its own kind of lie. The problem isn't fraud. The problem is quieter and much harder to fix. The thing at the center of the product, the part that makes it worth $500,000 instead of $50,000, isn't the thinking, it's the name. And a name can stay perfectly intact while the work underneath it rots. Because from the outside, those two look identical. Which brings us to how the money is actually made. Go back to that conference room. The 4 or 5 people in their 20s, buried in documents, checking line by line. Multiply them. Thousands upon thousands of them in every country on earth. Graduates, 22 years old, sharp, exhausted, doing careful, repetitive, unglamorous work at 11 at night. Above them, managers. Above those, senior managers. And at the top, the partners, the ones who own the firm, hold the relationships, and sign. The client is billed by the hour. The junior's hour costs the firm a fraction of what the client pays for it. That gap, multiplied across millions of hours, is the business, not genius, leverage. That pyramid has held for over a century. It survived wars, depressions, scandals, and the death of one of its own. It works because the base is cheap and the name at the top is expensive. And then, a few years ago, something arrived that could do the base's work. Faster, cheaper, at scale, without sleeping. The machine that sold certainty started using a machine.
Here's what I left out. Deloitte wasn't alone. Earlier this year, another of the 4, EY, pulled a published cybersecurity study off the internet. When people counted, 16 of its 27 citations were fabricated. More than half the sources in the document weren't real. Around the same time, KPMG withdrew a report of its own. Same problem. 3 of the 4. Inside of a year. And now the part I checked several times, because I didn't believe it the first time either. These firms sell artificial intelligence advisory. It's one of the fastest growing things they do. Companies and governments pay them substantial sums to come in and set the rules for how AI should be used responsibly. Governance, they call it. Making sure the machine is supervised. Making sure a human checks the output before anyone acts on it. That's the service. Being sold right now, today, at scale. KPMG itself ran a global study on this, with a university, across 47 countries, close to 50,000 people. One finding? About 2 out of every 3 workers said they'd used what AI gave them without checking whether it was true. They surveyed the world about a problem they were standing inside of. If you've made it this far with me, let me just say it plainly. Subscribe. Stay with this channel. Come back tomorrow and the day after. Not as a favor. You're still here 20 minutes into a video about accounting firms, which tells me you'd rather understand a thing than be handed a verdict about it. That's the whole audience I'm trying to build. If that's you, there's more of this, and we're nowhere near finished. Now, back to it. Because the reports were never the real story is who's disappearing from those buildings. Across the 4 firms, more than 9,000 jobs have been cut in their largest markets. PwC ran its first formal layoffs since the financial crisis. And then the number that actually matters. PwC is cutting its intake of new graduates in the United States by roughly 1/3 over the next 3 years. One of the internal reasons given was the impact of AI. Meanwhile, Deloitte has committed around $3 billion to building generative AI into how it works. Look at what that is. The base of the pyramid, the 22-year-olds, the cheap, careful hours, the part that generated the profit.
That base is being replaced by software. On a spreadsheet, it's flawless. Same output, lower cost, better margin. But the base was never only labor. The base was the nursery. It's where partners come from. You can't manufacture a person who has seen 400 sets of books and knows in his gut when something is wrong. You grow one. It takes 20 years, and it starts with a kid checking spreadsheets at 11 at night. Stop planting, and the field looks fine for a decade. Then 1 year, nothing comes up. And I owe you honesty here, because this is exactly where a weaker story would go for the kill. They are not collapsing. Deloitte grew around 5% last year. EY grew around 4%. These are enormous, profitable, deeply entrenched institutions. And anyone telling you they're about to fall is selling you a prophecy, not a fact. Hold that, honestly, because it matters. This isn't a death. It's stranger than that. It's a business model quietly consuming the thing that made it work, because the alternative looks worse. But underneath all of it sits a question nobody in that industry says out loud. We know what they actually sell, not the analysis, the signature, the name that carries the blame when it goes wrong. So what happens when the machine writes the report and a person still signs it? And what happens the day nobody needs the person?
Let me ask you something that sounds simple and isn't. Why do you trust an auditor? Not because he's smarter than you. Not because he's more honest than the next man. He isn't particularly. People in that job are the same mix of decent and tired and ambitious as everyone else. You trust him because he has something to lose. That's the whole thing. It's the entire foundation. And it's been sitting in plain sight for 180 years. When a man signs his name to a set of numbers, he isn't only telling you they're correct. He's handing over a hostage. He's saying, if this is wrong, you can come for me. My license, my firm, my house, my name in this trade for the rest of my working life. The signature was never a statement of fact. It was a stake. A person standing close enough to the number to be hit if it falls. And once you see that, you understand why the number is worth anything at all. We know it works because it happened. A little over 20 years ago, there were 5 of these firms, not 4. The 5th was Arthur Andersen, old, respected, and it had signed off on a company called Enron. When Enron came apart and the world went looking for whoever had checked the books, it found Andersen. And Andersen, tens of thousands of people, decades of reputation, a name that had meant something since before most of its staff were born, was gone inside a year. That isn't a tragedy. Look at it clearly. That's the mechanism working exactly as designed. The hostage was real. It got collected. And in the 20-some years since, it has never gone back to 5. Nobody has been punished that way again. But every person in that industry knows it can happen. That memory does more work than every regulation ever written. So now put the machine into it. A machine can be more accurate than a person, faster, more consistent, cheaper, better rested. It can check 10,000 invoices while a human checks 400. On every measure the industry says it sells, the machine wins. Except one. You cannot punish it. It has no license to lose, no house, no reputation among people it will have to face across a table next spring. It can't be sued, can't be shamed, can't be struck off, can't lie awake. When it's wrong, it isn't sorry, because there's nobody in there to be sorry. It simply produces a next confident sentence in exactly the same voice it used for the true ones. And here's where it turns. Right now, in that industry, the machine does more and more of the work, and a human being still signs, which means someone is putting his name, his license, his hostage on a document he did not fully build and cannot fully check. The stake is still there. The knowledge behind it is thinning. That's the crack. That's all of it. Not fraud, not collapse. Just a slow separation between the person who's accountable and the work he's accountable for. Now go back to where we started. A woman in her 40s, in a small apartment. A letter that isn't cruel. A payment reduced. A phone line that goes dead. A voice explaining that it wasn't a decision. It was the system. Nobody to argue with. You can't argue with a rule. And the review that was supposed to check that system, the independent one, the 237 pages, the $500,000 of public money. Parts of that were written by a system too. One that produced sources which didn't exist in the same calm voice it used for the real ones. And when it came out, the recommendations stood. Same shape, one floor up. She'll never read that report. She'll never learn the name of the firm, or the researcher in Sydney, or the book that was never written. She has a letter folded under a magnet on her fridge, next to a school photo, and a month to get through. And that's the size of her world right now. And it's enough. But somebody checked. That's what she was told, in the way we're all told it, without anybody ever having to say it out loud. Somebody checked. Somebody always checks. That's how all of this holds together. I'm not going to tell you what to make of that. You've been working it out since the second block. 3 things, and then I'll leave you with it. Follow this channel. There are other rooms like this one. Other places where something enormous is quietly holding up your ordinary life, with nobody pointing at it. We're going to keep opening them. Send this to 5 people. 5. Especially the ones who say it has nothing to do with them. That belief isn't an accident. It's the most valuable thing this whole arrangement produces. And in the comments, tell me something real. Not a slogan, not a performance. Just what you actually think. Then tell me what you want us to look at next. What's the thing you've always have suspected was propped up by nothing? The shifts start again on Monday. The letter's still under the magnet. Somebody checked.